I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
So welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 97th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we talk all about Star Trek all the time. Tonight we're talking about Star Trek Picard Season 1, Episode 7, Nepenthe. And as you can see, I have recovered from my silicone-based virus that I was suffering from last week. Dave and Brian hooked me up with a positronic matrix.
Yeah.
And cultured all of the infected cells.
We stirred it up for a little while. We put it in the spinning thing.
This is like my grandma, like Granny Fatheree was always big on using those good old-fashioned positronic matrices to cure all.
Yeah.
And like a little bit of Tennessee whiskey in there.
I noticed you still got a slightly scratchy throat, Fatheree.
I do, but
I don't think you're completely past
if y'all will bear with me, and we, as Cybok would say, we shall pass through it together.
Oh, wow, that's pretty deep. I thought you would just be like, I sound like a Klingon, this is cool.
Sure, you can look at it that way too. Although Klingons would be more like loud, roary voices, not like weak, scratchy.
That's true. You know how this episode's called Nepenthe? I noticed that when Jonathan Frakes was being interviewed in the Ready Room, he kind of, somewhat jokingly, said it's Nepenthe, or something like that. He, gave it, the French pronunciation.
Oh. Yeah, he says stupid shit
He might have just been goofing around. He and Brent Spiner were definitely having fun chumming it up.
It was fun to see them and Will Wheaton together. Anytime you get more than one of that cast together, it is a lot of fun. And that was a big part of my enjoyment of this episode, was seeing these TNG alums reunited on screen.
Yep.
So, this episode was written by Samantha Humphrey and Michael Chabon and directed by Douglas Aarniokoski.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just each going to give our opening statements, just me and Dave tonight. But we have a lot to talk about, so yeah, it's probably best we don't have too many people on here, because I think there's going to be a lot of opinions. There's so many Gorn eggs here. There's going to be a lot to throw out. But let's just each give our opening statement and general impressions of this episode. I guess I'll start things off.
Yeah, hit it.
I love this episode. This is my favorite so far. And I feel very excited for the show going forward. Y'all mentioned last week in my comments I gave for my opinions in last week's episode, y'all let our listeners know that one of the things I'm happy about with the show now is that I don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
There's not really a lot of predictability going into each week's episode.
And I think we've seen most of the clips that were in the trailer we've now seen.
Yes.
The vast majority.
And this is what I love. I love being surprised. I love not knowing what's going to happen. The use of Riker and Troy here, to be honest, I wasn't as excited for seeing them as a lot of people I knew were, because I saw that was coming. People have been posting these pictures from the episode and the promotional material that CBS puts out, and I was like, okay, I want the surprises. I don't want to, okay, Riker and Troy, I know I'm going to get that, okay, but I want to get past this and get to the surprises. But I ended up loving every single moment with them.
Yep.
I am so invested in Elnor and the stuff going on with him and Hugh on the Borg cube. I loved all the stuff on the Lost Sirena and the drama and tension there really ratcheting up, and some great performance from Alison Pill.
Mm-hmm.
And I am eager to see what happens in these remaining 3 episodes. So I would love if the show could maintain this going forward. This would...
Father, you said earlier, once upon a time, that if they don't tie the mystery together neatly, that it could be heartbreaking.
Exactly.
Is that still... do you still feel that risk hanging there a bit?
This did a little bit to alleviate some of my fears, with a little bit of how they pulled the curtain back a little bit, gave us not the entire reveal, but a big piece of it. Mm-hmm. And I feel a little bit better, but I still have that fear that this might not stick the landing. So I will be relieved when we make it through the season if I can maintain this level of enjoyment with the show.
I think sometimes there's the way that we enjoy a show is like, there's kind of the intellectual level and there's the emotional level. And the intellectual level is analyzing plot and motivation and plot holes and things like that. And the emotional is like, am I happy with where the characters ended up and all of that stuff?
Sure.
And it's possible to stick one and not the other. And I think they're more likely to stick the emotional one than the intellectual one. But could pull off both.
Yeah,
or fumble both.
And there were even moments in this episode where, okay, yeah, I can see the puppeteer strings. I understand the writing structure going into this, but the emotional ride for me worked. Every scene in this episode, the emotion it wanted to generate in the audience, like, I felt full on, and I really embraced this episode. I'm going to let you go, because I know that you felt a little different. So.
Yeah, I said you were reading from a prepared statement. This is just coming out of my brain space. This was a roller coaster ride for me that required a second viewing to pin my thoughts down. And as has been the case, I think with like this makes the third episode in a row, I think I might still be turning it over a little bit, and I'm going to see where things end up at during this review. But it was a mixture of highs and lows for me, with the lows having kind of kicked it off, because I can only say that I was wildly disappointed that they killed off Hugh. Spoiler warning.
Wildly disappointed doesn't do it justice. Like, you were pissed. Like, I knew you weren't gonna like that, but I was surprised at how angry you sounded.
Yeah, that was very real anger. That I was. We were just texting, just kind of some initial reactions, but I was like, this is the kind of thing that could like turn me into one of those people who's like, it's not real Star Trek, which I don't mean literally. It's real Star Trek, even if I don't like it. But it felt like a bit of a betrayal of the ethos of that sort of positivity when I when I realized that, like, of the three supporting characters who've like kind of recurred on the who've turned up from TNG on the show, Maddox, Hugh, and Icheb.
Icheb was from Voyager.
He was from Voyager. That they're all dead, and I was particularly dissatisfied with how Hugh died. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but suffice to say, it got it off on a bad foot for me. And then I think I wasn't able to quite enjoy as much the Riker-Troy stuff on Nepenthe, even though I did really like a lot of it. On second viewing, I really loved a lot of it on that. And I sort of felt that kind of brought me around, but man, that Hugh thing is going to stick in my craw, they will have to kind of like impress me, I guess, in the next few episodes with where things go
sure.
to get me past that.
And I actually, even though like I didn't have that same reaction, I empathize with you heavily. I've totally have been there where there's one little thing or maybe a few things that just drive me so insane. I have a hard time appreciating the rest stuff. Of the content that I would normally love. That happens to me fairly frequently.
Sure.
Things outside of Star Trek that I'm a fan of.
I think part of the thing is like there are things that happen where I'm like, I don't mind walking away from certain, like whether it's a comic I'm reading or a TV show or something like that. If it puts me off, a lot of time I'm kind of okay with walking away from it. Especially if it's something where I'm like, I'll just pick up with it later. But Picard has been pretty special, and I've liked so much of it. I think it actually hurt a little bit more to make that anything would make me maybe want to walk away. So that's why I was kind of like so frustrated.
Although you did start off liking the show more than probably any other Star Trek show in its initial first season.
Although I have like now that I've done the reevaluation on a lot of those, and first, like DS9, I actually ended up really kind of coming around on. It might be a run for the money. We'll see.
Okay, and we'll definitely get more into the entire like death of Hugh and all of that stuff
for sure.
Because
there's like all kinds of interesting dynamics that went on Nepenthe too. that we need to dive into. And I believe you have said that this episode has more Gorn eggs, or Star Trek Easter eggs, than anything else.
I counted a lot. When I listed them all out, I was surprised at how many we had.
And we'll get to those at the end.
So lots to talk about. We'll just go ahead and start with the short answer of what happened in this episode.
Yep.
To briefly sum it up, we have Picard and Soji transported away on the spatial projector on the Borg cube.
Right.
They arrive at Nepenthe because Picard thought he would be safe with Riker and Troy. We meet their family. We meet their kid. We find out they had another kid who unfortunately passed away.
By Thaddeus.
The ups and downs of life, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But they're able to help Picard realize he needed to get back in touch with like those old Picard values, that the Picard traits that he was really known for, like the compassion, the curiosity, the leadership, and they help,
and also to let go of some of those things that were holding him back from dealing with Soji.
Yeah, and they help him and Soji develop this trusting relationship. At the same time, Narissa on the Borg cube is being a total mega super villain bitch who breaks all of our hearts by killing Hugh. The La Sirena is on the run. Narek is in hot pursuit. They seem to shake them and get to Nepenthe and reunite with Soji and Picard, and now the mission continues. They have to go to Soji's homeworld that she recently rediscovered the location of in the previous week's episode.
Do we have a name for the homeworld?
No, the planet has no name. It only has a number.
Right.
I'll give you one guess what number I hope it is.
They can't do it for that. They can't have an inside joke as the Holy Grail site.
They have not dropped a verbal 47 in this entire show so far.
Oh, have they not?
No, so if they're saving it for this...
No, it's gotta be something that adds up to it or something. It's gotta be
I want to go to planet 47.
It's gotta be some Kabbalistic number that adds up to 47.
But that's pretty much the short answer of what's going on here.
Yep.
We'll just go into a more detailed breakdown, starting with that opening teaser before the titles.
Every flashback, right?
Yeah, every episode starts with either a dream set in the past or a flashback.
Yep.
This is a flashback to a previous episode, to a scene that we saw before, and I guess episode...
Just cut away a little bit early. Yeah.
Yeah, so we get to see the full conversation between Commodore O and Agnes.
In a lot of ways, this scene fulfilled what our predictions for it were.
Yes. And
I think we'd even talked about it on the show that I'm like, what could make Agnes believe so deeply in the threat to, the Zotvash fears about synths that she would be willing to kill someone she loved for it and, do the things she's doing. And I'm like, well, a Vulcan mind meld would do it. And that's what we got.
Yeah, Commodore O essentially gives her a glimpse of either an event from the past or some projected future. We don't really know, but the freeze frames are kind of hard to capture. I went and frame by framed it on my computer, but
they had to have known people would do that, and I knew that they don't want to give away too much.
Yeah, but we got looks of what appeared to be Romulans, possibly Vulcans. There's one shooting himself in the head. There's one, it looks like her face is ripped up and covered in green blood.
Oh yeah, she was, wasn't she like, ah!
Yeah, there's Dave was simulating ripping the flesh from his face.
Oh yeah, our audio listeners, imagine when you peel away your face and it's like another face on the old TV show V or something like that, or the guy in Poltergeist who rips his face off, like that.
But we also get looks of worlds blowing up. Which looked a lot like the footage from the Red Angel mind meld in Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, weird.
So I'm hoping this doesn't tie into Control, and the Zotvash is just trying to prevent another AI like Control from taking over.
I hadn't even considered that happening, but I do. I forgot early on we were a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
Yeah, I don't think they'll do that, but it's a little bit of a scary thought. And speaking of scary thoughts, apparently this was so disturbing that Soji or Wait, yes. No, it's Dr. Agnes.
Agnes.
That she immediately projectile vomits.
Yeah.
This is her vomiting episode.
The first time she vomits in this episode.
Yeah. She's going to get some more shots. There really should be a supercut at some point.
What did you think of Commodore O in this sequence?
Well, she's not one for consent. We've learned that. She was about as consensual with her mind meld as Spock was when he pulled the information from... who's the...
Valeris.
Valeris.
In Star Trek 6.
I knew it wasn't Valkyris, but that's all I could think of.
That's a little bit more justified, because they had like a prisoner captured, and like, we have to interrogate you. Yeah. Admiral O is just shows up one day. And
well...
Like, you're drafted into this covert conspiracy.
Well, we presume that she's with the Zhat Vash. She's part of their internal...
Narissa said that she's been a good ally.
Right. Now, what's interesting is, like, I did, of course, wonder because of the physical similarities if she was just Romulan and maybe it was some DNA thing to make her seem
She could be
Vulcan.
half Romulan.
But she just dropped a mind meld, and as far as I know, that's never been something Romulans can do.
Right. No, they could add that to the lore that, like, oh yeah, like some Romulans could do that.
Right, you could get psychically trained up or something.
She could just be like a Vulcan who has Romulan sympathies, or
right.
There's enough connective tissue between the Romulans and Vulcans that I'm sure whenever they explain this...
Was it on the TNG episode Data's Day that involves a Vulcan defection to...
Well, no, she was actually a Romulan spy.
She was a Romulan. Okay. I thought she might have been a Vulcan. Okay. Never mind that then. But yeah, so it was a little bit disturbing to see her do that. But we've already sort of gotten sinister vibes off of her, so that was just simply one more slightly sinister thing.
And you say that... But she also doesn't come off as totally sinister. It's nuanced.
Right, it could just be like kind of something of the bluntness of Vulcans.
Yeah, and she has like this legit concern of like, no, this is like going to threaten the galaxy. We need you to do this.
We don't know. The Zhat Vash might be 100% in the right here.
Even though Narissa is still a total asshole that I hate.
Yeah, well, she's an evil manipulator person in the tradition of evil manipulator people. But... I assume the Zhat Vash, I mean, like, they've got to, their goals have almost certainly got to be shown to be, like, reactionary, or, like, maybe they've been manipulated. You know, what if, like, their long-running prophecy and this shared vision or something that they've had, whatever it was that made them so sure that synths must be eradicated, turns out to be something that, like, 5 millennia ago, the Borg had traveled back in time and they did this to manipulate some certain events in what would become the present. Like the Borg is a completely random example, but like it could be anything. Like I feel like something like that may be where the story goes. Something where it seems very legit to them, but they are being played. Yeah. If it's true, then that's just kind of weird.
We've had characters mention that like they feel like a large section of the galaxy is at risk. Trillions of lives, in fact, is what Narissa says in this episode. Yeah, but Admiral O's sunglasses, we still don't know why, like, this Vulcan who's supposed to have, like, an inner eyelid, who's from, like, a very sunny desert world, is wearing sunglasses on Earth. But,
didn't Michael Chabon, in one of his Q&As...
He brings it up. He says...
He seemed to suggest that he's like, I wonder if that might mean something. And the suggestion seemed to be, maybe she's Romulan, not Vulcan. That was the vibe I got from what he was saying. But then she just did a mind meld whammy.
Yeah. But I'm fine with just telling myself that, like, she didn't want to get recognized as the head of Starfleet security or something like that. Or they're super secret spy sunglasses that can do cool stuff.
Yeah, it could be. Makes her look like a spooky Men in Black person, so...
But she gives Agnes the tracker.
Right.
And she tells her, like, it has to be chewed. So, like, all this information that she dumps on her, and then, like, a literal hard pill to swallow.
But, she gave her those some evil Flintstones chewables.
She gave her something to chew on.
Jesus.
But
is this what we've been reduced to, Fatheree? Oh my God.
But this carries on to what we'll later see with her behavior on the Lost Sirena.
Right.
Where she's been this double agent all along. She knows that they're tracking her. Mm-hmm. She willfully went along with this because she's so terrified from this mind meld vision.
Yeah.
And we see, like, that stress really start to weigh on her. And I thought, like I mentioned, Alison Pill does a wonderful performance in this episode.
For sure.
She had a ton of heavy lifting to do, and I thought that she sold it.
Yeah, I would agree.
But let's talk about back of the Borg cube. Mm-hmm. Lost Sirena is stuck in that tractor beam, and then on the cube, we have Elnor and Hugh.
Yes.
Who Elnor chooses to stay behind and assist Hugh.
Right.
Who, Hugh is super pissed because Narissa is executing all the XBs.
Right. Yeah, this is a pretty brutal sequence.
Jonathan Del Arco's performance, like, he sold, like, the pain.
For sure.
It made me sad.
It's clear that he has, like, forged a bond with these survivors and obviously identifies with them. And she is all too happy to just kind of kill them off. I think my issue with Narissa as a villain is that I think she feels, though, to me, one-dimensional. They gave her the quasi-incestuous seductiveness around her brother, which just kind of feels
weird. It
just feels like kind of like a tacked-on thing. But I was trying to think, and I don't know if this is a rule I can just say hard and fast, but I feel like some of the best villains, you know their motivation. And we do know that the motivation is the same as all the Zat Vash in this, but it's also, like, I guess they had kept it... well, how long have we known that they were trying to, like, get the home world of the synths out? Just an episode or two?
We knew that going back to...
or we know that for quite some time.
When she tells Narek, or, like, they're talking, and he's like... well, I'm trying to get the nest. I'm trying to get all of them.
Right. I guess what I would say is sometimes the best villains...
That goes back to episode 4, I think.
Okay.
Because we just met her in episode 3.
I feel like the best villains might have motivations that have some a little bit of depth to them. We can understand to a decent degree why Khan...
She doesn't have, like, a personal...
wrecked as he is.
She doesn't have, like, a personal motivation.
Thanos doesn't have a personal motivation, but he's a pretty compelling villain because he's this guy who seems so, like, weirdly almost philosophical about how he goes about it, that he, can at least make a decent game of wanting things to make a better universe, even though it sounds like a crazy person saying that. Now, Narissa probably thinks that same thing, but she's acting like a Spectre agent in a Bond
But you
film.
really hate this character. Like, you've complained about her before.
Yes. She has had no scene that impressed me, I think, and I found all her scenes actually repetitive.
I actually, even though I thought, like, the incest stuff was weird, and I wanted them to back off from the Romulan Lannisters, I always kind of like when she's on screen.
Really?
Yeah, but I know that you hate her.
Yeah. So, yes, the fact that she should be the one to kill off this character that they've done such good work with Hugh, who to me represents, like, one of the sort of great triumphs of empathy on Star Trek The Next Generation. A character who, in the episode that he appeared in, made no less than Picard and Guinan, initially want to say, like, nothing to do with him, throw this guy to the wolves. And then he won them over, and I'm like, and then, he goes through all this pain and the events that followed of that, where the Borg became, like, sort of listless, and, the thing where lore took over. So he's gone through all this, and he gets killed by, like, my least favorite villain in Trek history. So yes, suffice to say, it felt cheap to me, and I felt like they were just trying to raise her status as a boss villain in the worst way possible.
Well, I was surprised last week when I wasn't able to join the conversation, but when you and Brian were discussing the previous episode, I was surprised to hear you say that you wanted Hugh to go along on the mission with Picard, and you wanted him to become, like, a regular character in season 2 or something. Because I actually didn't want Hugh to overstay his welcome.
Well, what's interesting is, like, I can't say that he's, like, had a ton of great screen moments, but I think, honestly, I feel like a part of it is Jonathan Del Arco, what he's brought to it, and I actually think, to some degree, what the just purely the visual effects guys have done, where, he obviously looks so much more human than he did previously. That I felt like he had a real presence, and that the character sort of thematically meant something to the story. He represented a certain kind of hopefulness. Even Picard embracing him represented something about that. So yeah, he easily won me over. I also I love the idea of them picking up some obscure characters and doing something with them. I always like to see characters kind of rehabilitated or reforged with new directions. I don't like to see them brought in to be killed off to show the bad guys are bad. So, yeah, that was, I would have loved to have seen more of the character.
Well, what I liked with Hugh is that by, like, what Picard did in Iborg, where he chose to, like, spare Q, even though that he could have possibly wiped out the Borg, or at least, like, severely weakened them.
Right.
But he chose not to.
Right.
I like seeing that paid off here, where because he did the right thing, decades earlier, Hugh's able to like help him and like rescue him and Soji.
Right.
So I loved seeing that, and I feel like Hugh...
To me, I don't think I'd call that a true payoff. Like that's a character dying to rescue somebody.
He didn't die to rescue them.
Well, what would you're talking about him initially helping them?
Yeah,
helping him get through the portal and stuff like that. Okay, well, to me that's not a satisfying payoff to me. But I can see where you're coming from.
No, for me, like I loved that ending last week where he was able to like save Picard.
Right. Okay, I agree with that. Like honestly, I think if that was the last we saw of him, I think I would have been cool with that.
But I was also like I was okay with like his death here because I really hate Narissa now, and I really want to see Elnor cut her head off. And I wouldn't have cared about like this conflict as much if she hadn't done something really nasty like that. And I think that sometimes like you need to have your heart broken. And I hated seeing this character die. Like I screamed, "Oh no!" Like when that knife hit his throat.
Yeah.
And
when that happened, I thought that maybe it was going to be like a poison knife, and she's like, "That's Romulan poison. He's a dead man." And then we were going to actually maybe find out that, like, he's got Borg nanotech shit going on, still a little bit of activity that, like, cleansed it or something. So I had a little hope for a minute or so.
But, yeah, like, spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, a game that came out, like, 23 years ago. But I believe, like, sometimes you need Sephiroth to, like, show up and stab Aerith in the chest with a sword. Just to be an asshole and just to make you hate him.
Yeah.
And if your bad guys never win, they don't have like the same threat level.
Sure,
so that's why I accept it.
But I would just say that it doesn't have to be binary like that. I'm okay with. I would be fine with her gaining victories. I think it's because it's actually because Maddox and Icheb and he died.
I was about to bring that up.
That it bugged me. So
I
much.
want them to stop doing this because when you pointed that out to me, this is the third time that happened. I was like, ugh, yeah. I complain about derivativeness.
Yeah,
a lot. Derivative, is that a word?
Derivativeness might be probably actually the better word.
Yeah,
but
like when things get derivative, I complain.
Yeah.
And so I don't want them to create like this trope of like bringing back TNG, Voyager, even if they're people that like no one really loves. Like I don't remember anyone ever saying like I love Bruce Maddox.
Right.
I feel like bringing him back and killing him, I'm like, oh, yeah, that was meaningful. That had like that big shocking ending that I loved. That like really shook me. Like, oh my god, what did they do to poor Agnes Girardi to make her do this? Yeah. Like, I thought that was meaningful. I liked that. I liked Icheb giving 7 of 9 that motivation. Like here, like I even though like it hurt me, I liked the payoff of the death of Hugh, but I totally understand like why people dislike that. And realizing that just happened 3 times. I want them to cut that shit out. They can't keep doing that, or it's
already kind of pushing.
Yeah, it will lose that effect that I said like I've enjoyed thus far. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to keep enjoying that. It will lose its effect on me.
Yeah.
So stop it.
I think as a counterpoint, we're going to get to in just a little bit, is the much stronger part for me personally is all the stuff on Nepenthe, is the ups and downs that the Riker family has gone through. Felt to me kind of both truthful and believable as far as the highs and lows of a life lived. But killing off main characters, just frankly, it always hurts more than it does if you kill off NPCs, unknown characters.
Well, he's not a main character. He's a guy who showed up twice on TNG.
I guess that's true, but he's sort of a notable, I guess, side character. He was in one of the more known stories. He's also, I think one of the things that bugged me was that they're all 3 characters who had gone through some degree of escape or redemption. Maddox began as a villain, became Data's friend. Hugh began as a villain, became a unique organism and an individual, and the first Borg to kind of break free. That's big. And then Icheb I haven't seen yet, but I'm led to believe he also went through a journey. And so like the giving these guys miserable, horrible painful endings is like is I think was sort of insult to injury.
But I also know like just from talking to you about other stuff like I have noticed that like killing characters bothers you more than probably most people. Like you,
for sure.
You always want there to be like a really strong justification for it.
Yeah, I need a strong justification or like a scene that I just think is exceptional.
Whereas I'm more welcoming to it because I'm like, yo, that's how real life is. Like people die. Like,
yeah, but to me that's the Walking Dead philosophy. Where Walking Dead, like the first 2 or 3 times it happens, sure.
Well, it's crazy if it happens like that frequently. But I mean,
like in season 7 or whatever, people were just like, yeah, they killed off Glenn. Yeah, I guess they'll just kill off anybody now.
But for me, like it's like been like 14 years. Like, oh yeah, like if I look back at my own life over the last 14 years, like I've lost people that were close to me. Like that's just like a thing that happens.
The writers have control over the show, and they've distilled it down into like 10 episodes that we're going to get to enjoy. And they've in the space of those 10 episodes, they chose to kill off 3 supporting players of old. So that's on them.
Yes.
All right. But so we're of 2 different minds on that. But we don't have to get too hung up on it.
But I do want to talk about like Hugh had like that revenge plan where he's like, I was scared. I had to be tempted by the immense power of the Queen Cell, but now I'm so pissed. He's like, come on, Elnor, we're gonna go in there. I'm gonna go like super Borg and just like kick all these Romulan asses.
Yeah.
And by him like saying that out loud, I was actually thinking like, why would you say that? They're probably spying on you. And then like Narissa shows up and she's like, we're spying on you, fool. And now I can kill you. But what that set up now, it does look like Elnor is going to summon 7 of 9. I don't know how he has like Picard's Fenris Ranger calling card, or that was like an other one that was on the cube or something. But
maybe we'll see like some little flashback where he like palmed it off to him or something. Did it actually say Fenris SOS or something like that? That's a little silly.
Well, they had to communicate it to the audience.
Yeah.
I also loved like that shot, like all like the Romulan guards closing in on them.
Yeah.
It felt very cinematic and like almost kind of like Star Warsy, how like they use like the Death Stars sometimes.
These guys, I mean, they're pretty expert with their visuals and their cinematic style on Picard and Discovery for that matter.
I like the idea of like 7 of 9 and Elnor teaming up and taking over this Borg cube.
I think we're gonna get that.
I want to see because I 7 of 9 is one of my favorite characters, and I want to see her come back and be like angry. Like Mama Bear 7, like getting revenge. I don't know if they're gonna like make her like take over this cube and like make her like become like a Borg queen.
Yeah,
I think that would be like really cool if we could have the idea with the Borg is that they're kind of like the ultimate evil in Star Trek.
Yeah,
but Star Trek is also like the type of universe where there maybe shouldn't be an ultimate evil. Like
everything is about sort of discovering what's underneath the surface of someone who's perceived as evil.
So what if we could get like a race of like Borg, like led by like I'm just spitballing all of this, but like if Queen 7 of 9 could be like a like less nefarious Borg collective.
Yeah.
And kind of how like the Klingons once became allies of the Federation, maybe now like we could have like Borg that we learn to be friends with.
Interesting. A reboot of the Borg?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if that's anything close to what they're thinking, or if there's going to have like 7 of 9 show up and like just blow everything up and kill all the Romulans, or what it's going to be. But I'm glad that she's still involved, and her and Elnor are like 2 of my most favorite characters on this show, so I like the idea of like them teaming up.
I'm going to say something super hippy-dippy here.
Go for it.
Which is that... I've heard, you and Brian, I think I've heard you both talk about, like, wanting 7 to get revenge and wanting to see Elnor cut off Narissa's head and stuff like that. And I was thinking, man, like, the whole message of, like, First Contact was about Picard escaping the claws of, vengeance around his heart. And, like...
But the movie ends with him, like, breaking the neck of the Borg Queen.
Well, sometimes the movies want to have their cake and eat it, too. They want to give you a satisfying bit of payback and release the character from the thrall of vengeance. But I'm just like, it's a little weird for me that to have Star Trek wanting payback that hard. That said, Wrath of Khan has so many great payback moments from Kirk, and thrown at Kirk, honestly, if you're rooting for Khan. That I get it, but it's just something. There's some part of me that's cringing a little bit whenever y'all are like, "Yeah, I can't wait to see your head chopped off," and I'm like, "No, that's not Star Trek."
I would disagree and say that the franchise is big enough that like we do have room for that type of stuff.
That's probably true.
I don't want it to be that all the time.
It's just kind of like this gut reaction. I just want to throw that out there. My inner hippie is disturbed at your anger.
Okay,
sir.
Well, that's your problem, not mine.
We reach, brother.
I I did love hearing Elnor also doing his cool catchphrase, please my friends choose to live in Romulan language.
Oh, yeah.
And I like, because we heard about the Co-op Malat and Tal Shiar being like these ancient enemies. Yeah. So I did like seeing like this Romulan lore expansion that we've gotten, like visualized so energetically with like the two of them fighting.
The ultimate liars versus the ultimate truthers.
Yes.
Oh, I don't want to say truther though. That's got connotations. But you knew what I meant.
Just the ultimate honest and the ultimate dishonest.
Sure.
But do you have anything else about like Elnor and the Hugh or anything on the cube? Or...
I'm honestly like, I'm not super interested in that subplot at this point. When I see Elnor whooping ass, I may be at a point next week where I'm like ready to really enjoy it. But yeah, for right now, it's too fresh. I'm too angry.
Okay. Because I
want revenge.
I was worried that they were going to be a little too reserved with Elnor, and we wouldn't see him kick enough ass.
It was a little weird that they had the heist episode.
They held back for a little bit.
Stardust City Rag, was that it?
Yeah.
And like he like didn't have enough. I was just like, okay, some thugs are going to accost him and he's going to whoop up on him. And so for a minute I was like, well, maybe are they going to forget to use their super cool swordsman? It looks like they're not going to forget.
Well, before we get to all like the fun Nepenthe stuff, let's talk about the La Sirena and everything that happened there.
Yep.
They get released from the tractor beam because Narek is going to pursue them. And he looked pretty cool in like his flight suit going to get in the snake shit.
Yeah, it's like what do they call it? The snakehead ships?
Yeah, well, Ralphie called it snake shit at first.
Oh, did she actually?
Yeah, she was like, he's in a, what do you call it? It was one of those snake shit ships. And then Chris Reyes was like, oh, you mean like a snakehead?
Yeah.
But, it was a cool design. I'm not sure why it doesn't have a cloaking device and can just like completely go invisible.
You would think. They made out that it's basically like a super well-armed scout ship.
Yeah. I mean, they probably wanted like a fast ship to keep up with them. But
do you think something I was wondering about Narek, and I think maybe this is also something that's frustrating me retroactively about his story, is that we saw a lot of like him kind of wooing Soji and trying to manipulate her. Has that ultimately amounted to anything? Like, we were like, oh, well, maybe he's fallen in love with her. That's what the sisters.
The last episode showed he was pretty conflicted, and he was like crying when he like was trying to kill her.
But ultimately, he got the information out of her and hit the release the poison button. Yeah. He just like kind of hesitated about it. Well, so like, is that all those subplot?
When he walked out of there, like he was like full on like crying. Like, he was like bawling his eyes out. That was noticeable to me because that was the first time that they really made it clear that he had a confliction.
Yeah.
And I thought it was kind of a problem with the show that they didn't plant those seeds early enough. I couldn't tell how genuine his feelings for her were.
Same here, yeah.
But after seeing that, it confirmed it. And I think the idea of him, like, he always has to be solving a puzzle. His mind always has to be working. He always has to be, like, unwrapping a mystery. Because Romulans are, like, fascinated with, like, secrets and mysteries. And so, as he's, like, piloting the ship, he's also doing one of his, like, Romulan Rubik Cube toys in one hand. And I thought that was really cool. It's a cool, like, little visual detail. I'm kind of a very, like, tactile person myself. I'm always, like, fiddling with, like, objects and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was also cool that I think like this is probably kind of like a stress relief or coping for him because I think he is worried about Soji now. Yeah, and I do wonder. I don't know if
he might make some decisions when he gets to their lightning planet of 2 moons.
I mean, he did attempt murder on Soji. He failed. He hasn't done anything too egregious.
Yeah, he hasn't completely
he could
given over to the dark side.
He could potentially be redeemed. He could be forgiven. Like if he betrays Narissa, if he like kills her or stops her and saves the good guys or something, I could see that. I could see them writing like a redemption for him.
I feel like I don't know if I'll buy it. At least something like that to happen, or maybe some unexpected thing. Just because I'm like, I feel like if all of his like falling for her was only meant that he hesitated a little bit before he hit the poison gas to kill her button, then that's kind of a weak through line for that arc. But it is clearly in the process, so I'm gonna wait it out and see what's going on.
No, also I really loved the score, the music in this episode, and part of that was when Soji was remembering things about Narek. Obviously, she's like really bitter, and understandably, like this guy that said he was in love with her tried to kill her.
This was my favorite Soji episode, actually.
I liked the that Romulan, like that melancholy kind of like romantic but mysterious Narek theme that they have.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that I noticed that. I definitely heard the core Picard theme used in several occasions and kind of played up, but I don't think I noticed the Narek one.
Yeah. I like Jeff Russo's scores for Discovery and Picard, but like I think the stuff he does best is like whenever he can kind of like flirt with like the dark side type of emotional spectrum. He always does that stuff.
That's where he shines.
That's my jam when I hear that.
Okay.
But yeah, so the Lost Sirena is being pursued. They get like this little we'll call it a warp speed pursuit, cat and mouse.
Yeah.
Well, this
he
is
basically
going on,
tries to do the old pull the air brakes that Captain Rios does and let him
like in
overshoot him.
Spaceballs.
Yes,
they do that in Spaceballs. When the bad guys went to ludicrous speed.
I don't remember it, but
they've gone plaid.
What I remember is actually an issue of the G.I. Joe comic where I learned where there's a dogfight happening and the F-15 type plane does its wings to kind of break itself so that the other plane will overshoot and then they can chew him up with their machine gun. But anyway, it's a kind of a space adaptation of real tactics, I guess.
No, I thought it was good here that like the stress of working with the enemy, of betraying the man that you loved. This is like really starting to like weigh on Agnes, and she's starting to like break the fuck down.
Right.
To the point to where like Raffi is trying to like help her coach. She's like, oh, let's just. I think she actually wanted to like get drunk or get high with her.
She was gonna for sure hook her up with drugs.
But she's like, no, I want cake. Which was cool because like it reminds you like, oh yeah, there is like a certain level of innocence with this character who is being very uninnocent in some of her actions here. But
I jotted down what Raffi said. She said something like. She's like, just let Raffi take care of you. She's going to hook you up with whatever you need.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, they're going to go shoot up. This is going to become, what's the movie with Obi-Wan Kenobi doing heroin?
Train Spotting?
It's going to become Train Spotting. It's going to become Space Spotting. It's going to become Ship Spotting, whatever.
When you said Obi-Wan Kenobi doing heroin, I was thinking like, Alec Guinness did heroin in a movie? I was like, I don't remember that in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or The Bridge Over the River Kwai.
But yeah, she needed she needed the Troy comfort of some sweet tooth.
I did like seeing Raffi like being sweet here and like that conversation.
She actually went full maternal kind of.
Yeah, and I mean like we know she's a mother.
Right. And in fact, she has like been denied her ability to be a mother, so it makes sort of sense that she would be really wanting to kind of flex those muscles, so to speak.
Yeah, and she also like has
her
a lot
mother
of
muscles.
She has a lot of guilt, so she's like trying to be like overcompensate and be like extra nice and nurturing.
Right.
Probably like more nurturing than you would need. But
right.
When she says that she's not a good person, but sometimes like she can take like all like these broken pieces of a good person. When somebody really needs it and pull it together.
Right.
And when she says that makes like Agnes start crying because she's like, oh, you think you're the broken bad person? I'm actually the broken bad person. But it's all like they don't speak that in dialogue. You just read it based on the actions. And I thought that was like a combination of good writing, good directing, and good acting.
Yeah, I gotta agree there.
And the way that Narek keeps finding them is because of the tracker they established in the prologue.
Yeah, it's great when like Rios goes to Agnes and he's like, I think they're tracking us. I think it could be a tracker on Raffi.
See, I loved that moment because at first I was thinking like, oh, Rios is on to her.
Mm-hmm. But he's trying to draw her out.
I like that he's like 80% of the way there, but then wrong. Because I don't want the characters to be perfect and infallible and get everything right. I like that they can make mistakes.
Yeah, honestly, he knows that Raffi is, like, she's, I guess, made some questionable decisions in her life, and probably seems more like the kind of person who could get turned or something like that.
I mean, like...
She's bitter.
Crackheads are always, like, easily manipulated and can be turned against you.
She's a crackhead conspiracy theorist.
Essentially.
And also, I mean, but, like, the big thing
I wouldn't trust her either.
She's a Starfleet kind of burnout who's, like, for the last 15 years or so... has been, like, living on the edge of society. And
he slept with Agnes, so he probably has, like, a little bit
emotionally compromised.
A little bit of trust there.
Yep. Thinking with the wrong head, dude. But yeah, let's see. Like, how does that resolve itself?
He has to leave sickbay, go back to the helm, and that's when she replicated the poison. The first time I watched this, I thought that when she shot herself with that hypo spray, she was trying to kill herself.
Right.
But I don't think that's what happened. I think she was neutralizing the tracker. And
I guess you're right, but you know what? I guess I thought she was trying to neutralize it by killing herself.
Because there's probably like more efficient ways to kill yourself.
I guess so. Yeah, you're right.
Right after that happened...
Like, she might have thought that, I'll be okay, She maybe didn't know exactly.
Well, there's an emergency medical hologram on there.
Yeah.
Which we still don't know how it didn't, like, rat her out for killing Maddox, unless she went in and, like, deleted some files.
Yeah.
Which is what we kind of theorized.
They're not going to show it, but it's reasonable.
But after like she goes into a coma, Narek loses his signal lock.
Right.
And it's shortly after that Rios is finally able to get in communication range with Picard, who has kind of been worried about him this entire episode.
Rios doesn't realize that the signal lock dropped, or that they lost Narek because Jurati cleansed her system.
Right. He's just like, okay, like, we finally got away from this guy. Like, he hasn't shown back up.
Right.
Is what I would assume. But that's pretty much all I have on that. The throwing up the red velvet cake did look extremely nasty. And I'm normally not grossed out by stuff like that, but yeah, that looked terrible.
I did not quite buy that she would have had... Those were like big slices of cake that she said she had 2 and started on a 3rd.
Yeah.
I didn't quite buy it. I feel like 1.5 kind of could feel realistic. 2 plus feels like no man could do that unless they were super high on Rafi's drugs.
Yeah, she might have had the munchies from the...
Rafi might have given her some edibles in that cake.
I wouldn't put it past her.
All right, well, that's the fan theory I'm running with.
Okay.
All right, let's move to the happiest segment of the show.
Yes, we're going to finally talk about Planet Nepenthe.
Yeah.
Which, Nepenthe being the name from the Odyssey of the drug that's supposed to make you forget your heartbreak.
Yeah.
And this is a place of like healing and where you overcome tragedy.
Why did they not make this Baku from Star Trek Insurrection?
Because that would have solved Picard's aromatic syndrome. And they're probably gonna.
Don't you have to live on it, like, to kind of resolve that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Its effects wear off because like Geordi got his sight back, but then in Star Trek Nemesis he's back to the robot eyes.
Yeah.
So
I realized that, like, this planet with its sort of vaguely described, healing qualities, I was like, oh, that sounds just like the planet in Star Trek Insurrection. I don't really think that they needed to do a call out to Insurrection, but I kind of would have liked if they somehow had.
The fake science here is kind of different. Where this is
guess so.
This is like it's so like nutrient rich, and like all the food here is like so it's like super organic. It's even more organic.
This is like hot.
It's very good for you.
It's the hot springs of the universe.
Well, we get that opening shot of like that beautiful world, and like this bunny runs by, and I think for a split second, like, did that bunny have a unicorn horn? I could barely spot it. And then later
on, they're gonna eat it.
Yeah, later when they start saying bunny corn, I'm like, it did have a unicorn horn. Which I like that. It reminded me of like that dumb dog from The Enemy Within in the original series.
Oh, yeah. The little antenna dog.
Yeah.
I did not notice the horn, and so I thought it was more like, almost like a play on like barleycorn or something like that. But yes, it was apparently, I guess they're not all vegan in the future, because apparently they're out slaughtering these rare unicorn bunnies for their very delicious looking pizza.
Yeah, if it's anything like an earth rabbit, its kind of biological niche is to like reproduce at a high rate, and it kind of serves to be... Yeah. Prey in nature is kind of its role. So
yeah, what you're saying is that Riker was doing the equivalent of clear cutting the forest or rather, controlled burn of the forest to help it grow.
I mean, I'm someone who has, as a kid, actually, when I was about the age of Kestra here, I have killed rabbits and ate them in stew and enjoyed it, and it all seemed kind of fun to me, actually. But just let's talk about Kestra. Let's talk about like this whole Riker family. I guess we'll just go through like the order we're introduced to them. When Soji and Picard show up, we meet like this little Ewok looking thing with a bow and arrow. I was like, what the hell is this?
It reminded me of. It looked like she was like cosplaying from Princess Mononoke with the stripes on her face, or as like one of the what do they call them in Peter Pan? The Wild Boys,
the Lost Boys,
yeah. Wild Boys Duran Duran song.
Yeah, kind of. If you wouldn't have said Peter Pan, if you would have just said the Lost Boys, I would have been thinking of the vampire movie.
Yeah,
but They need to go to a planet with like people in like leather jackets and blonde mullets.
They've explored so many different other cultures. Why not? Why not 80s hair bands, glam metal?
So I think a good rule for kid actors. This episode kind of made me think that will probably be my rule of thumb going forward. Mm-hmm. If you don't notice any problems with like the kid actor's performance, I call that like a good performance from a kid actor.
Sure.
Because we typically don't get strong performances from them. I really loved the...
Sometimes kids get very non-kid-like dialogue and they struggle with it, clearly. I mean, there's some great kid actors.
Or they have to like overact because they're not able to perform nuance, so they have to like exaggerate everything.
The actress playing Kestra, what was she, probably around like 13 or 14?
She's probably older than she looks.
Yeah, that's the usual tradition.
She's probably like 16 and playing like 12 or 13.
But she did a great job, and she seemed very natural. And if she was precocious, she seemed precocious in the way that I would expect from, and creative in the way I would expect from the child of a Starfleet commander and a Betazoid.
He would have been captain.
Or captain,
This would have been after his time on the Titan.
That's true. But anyway, yeah, he felt like the offspring of Riker and Troy, I guess is my point.
And
she felt rather.
The whole like wild girl of the Vivine thing.
Yeah.
I like that because it's like a fun kid thing. Like I like when like kids can be kids.
And of course it tied her to the sadness that we will learn about of her brother who died, who like invented the kind of mythology that she's enjoying.
They put a lot of thought in just building this Riker family.
Yes.
Like an impressive amount of thought.
Yep. So actually, you know what was cool about it is that so in a little bit like Kirk in his kind of, and we knew this from the trailers, a little bit like rustic Kirk, and when he was inside, what do they call it in Star Trek Generations? The
Nexus.
The Nexus. That's a little bit of the life they're living. It's very much a kind of chill rural life. Clearly not without technology because he turns on some cool scanners and stuff later on, but.
I like that they didn't just abandon all their technology.
Right. It was what seemed like a reasonable balance, a cool balance. But I guess the point I was going to make is when we see them, they feel like they have the natural rhythms of a family that's been living there for years. Yeah. And I thought the writers did a great job of like, and the actors, of course, too, of making it all seem natural. I just felt like, yes, this family has been living through here. When they talk about sad things in the past, the sort of tone drops in that in the very real way I think, would. So they can be a mixture of like incredibly happy to see Picard and then a little bit wary about his mission and then sad to bring up the past and then like sometimes critical of him. They go through a really wide variety of emotions interacting with him, but it all really felt natural. And it's actually the thing, like you said that you couldn't predict quite how this scene, how these scenes were going to play out, even though you weren't initially kind of excited about them. But I think that was what was so kind of cool about it is that it's like, yes, we got Riker and Troy and they were broadly happy or content, but they clearly had to deal with a lot. And, the way it played out was brought to life by all this dialogue and character so that it didn't feel old hat. It didn't feel like we were just going through the motions of catching up.
And I got so excited. I've talked about this before, but I got so excited the first opening scene of the show, when they open with blue skies and Data and Picard. I was literally jumping up and down, which I typically don't react that fanboyish. Right. But I was literally jumping up and down with excitement when 7 of 9 beamed over. And said, "You owe me a ship, Picard." Yeah, the same thing. I got like the same reaction. I am surprised at how much I love seeing these characters return because when they cut to the mansion, or not the man, but like the cabin, and we see Marina Sirtis step out on that porch, and I get to see Counselor Troy again. Yep, I had like that same level of excitement, and it feels so great to like return to Berman era Star Trek, and
it is like, I feel like it's like revisiting a family.
It is, or it's like
you're like, it's like we're in Picard's spot of revisiting his old family.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time in like memories, like remembering, like enjoying something like 25 years ago or something, and probably to like an unhealthy degree. Okay, and I think a lot of us this is why like we buy into all the nostalgia porn
Sure.
If you want to be cynical about it. But I think that is fun to be able to revisit that stuff. And I think that's probably a good thing to be able to be able to hold on to some of those things you grew up loving.
Yeah.
And I always want to be able to just like go back in time and like relive all those experiences. And this was so wonderful how it fulfilled that desire I have to a degree that I had not expected.
Did you notice, like, to me, this is like something that I actually really enjoyed. I don't mean this as a criticism, but I felt like Marina Sirtis was on the verge of tears in almost every scene. Like all the early scenes, when she had more serious conversations with Soji.
Let's talk about her. Then we'll talk about like we'll talk about Will Riker and Thad.
Okay.
Let's talk about like Deanna Troi. They actually did a better job writing her here than in any of the Next Generation movies and the vast majority of the show.
She felt more fully realized. She felt like she didn't feel like someone who was there to fill the role of just being the I sense duplicity captain.
They gave her good counselor shit to do with Picard.
Yeah. She had a sharp, quick analysis of Soji, and when she talked to Soji, she cut through the bullshit. She saw where Picard had failed. She saw who Soji was.
When she hugs him and she can like tell that he's sick.
Oh, yeah.
And that was just like all on her face. She doesn't say anything. And he's trying to reassure her. He's like, no, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Right. But you know what's interesting is Picard has had many moments in the series of lying to Deanna about those things. Whether it's about I think specifically when Borg stuff comes up. It happened in First Contact. It happened when they brought Hugh on board, where she's like, do you want to talk about it? And he's like, I'm quite fine, counselor. And he obviously isn't, and she knows it, and he knows that she knows, like, most of the time, and they kind of have a professional respect. So, but yes, like, here, I think it's, in some ways they haven't, like, it's almost like the old show didn't always trust her to kind of be more forthright about it, to sometimes call him on it in a sort of more active way. And she for sure calls him on it in this.
And she also has to play, like, the pain of, like, a grieving parent who's lost a kid.
Yeah.
Who... I frequently say that I've said this on the podcast before, but like the worst thing in the human experience is the death of a loved one, and the death of a child is the worst of the worst. Like you ask any parent, like, what's the worst thing that could happen to you? They would tell you, like, oh, something happened to my kids.
Right.
Like literally, they'd rather go through anything other than that.
You know what's interesting? I was remembering the excellent Trek podcast, Women at Warp. They were talking at one point about the episode. Is it just called The Child? The one that's the...
Oh, with Ian?
The weird episode where she's impregnated by an alien with a fast-growing child. Yeah. But and the episode has a lot of problematic elements, but they mentioned that Marina Sirtis had said that she actually loved making that episode just because she got to bring a lot to the fore, and she got to emote and have big, strong reactions and have a character arc in the episode that she's often kind of denied on that show. So for her, that episode was actually like a cathartic and like a really enjoyable acting experience. And it was also about child loss too.
Yeah, she loses a kid there. So this is the second time this has happened to her. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it's
the big moment for that for me, by the way, though, is when they're basically using like Thad's room as a guest room for Picard, and I guess like Soji is bunking with Kestra,
right?
And when she's going to like take him into Thad's old room, and when she puts her hand on the doorknob, and then she like takes a breath because she's like, it's gonna really hurt to walk in this room.
I don't think I quite noticed that. That's great.
Yeah, that actually
that is a nice touch.
That reminded me of like someone I know who like they lost a kid, and I think like they have like those same feelings. It's like those
got
everyday
to mentally
reminders.
Build yourself up for something so simple as opening a room. You know what I in the Ready Room show afterwards, I don't know if it was Alex Kurtzman or somebody else from the show, but they pointed out that that Picard himself, that he is in many ways the Picard he's always been, but there's a vulnerability to him. And I was thinking she really portrayed that in this one too, when she gets a little worried that Picard might be bringing trouble to their door and potentially something that could threaten Kestra.
Yeah, I'm not as brave as I used to be.
Oh, yeah, and he says, and then he in a sort of very loving way says, then you're becoming wiser, I think, or something like that. But I really loved that she could be vulnerable in that way, and I didn't feel like sometimes you felt like the writers kind of made her a little bit too weak on the old show sometimes, and I didn't feel that was weak. It just felt real, and really a beautiful scene.
Yeah, let's talk about Thad, who I think is a very interesting character.
Yeah, for an off-screen character, we know a decent bit about the lost son of Riker and Troy.
I do think the silicon-based virus that has to be cured with a positronic matrix is a little dodgy.
I agree.
To me, like, a positronic matrix, I always thought that was just, like, the android brain.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see how, like, you
couldn't create a positronic matrix without building an android that'll blow up Mars. It's a bit of a stretchy coincidence that the very dilemma that has been haunting Picard was also in its way responsible for the death of their son.
But I like that, like, the synth band did have, like, those big ramifications.
It at least suggests, I think in a way that you're like, well, are things that bad without the synths? Like, yeah, it's too bad because we love Data, and if he were around, he'd be, like, illegal. But this gave us something to really see that, oh yes, the research and development would have yielded that. Just as, like, there can be things that, like, NASA's doing that yields, like, a cure for cancer or something at some point. They have unexpected trickle-down effects for scientific research. But like, I think the most important thing really about the kid is that we do actually, like, he's more than just his death.
Yes.
He's also his imagination.
It felt like such a great Star Trek character to have this kid raised on Starfleet ships be curious and intrigued by the concept of a home world. I've never thought of that before.
Right, that's like an actual sci-fi kind of idea.
Yeah, and it felt super genuinely Star Trek. And
so he yearned for a homeworld himself, and when they moved to Nepenthe, he got it. And
well, before that, he had created his fictional world,
but he had built up a fictional world with like different
called Ardani, and it felt very Tolkien.
Yeah,
it felt very like fantasy. Yeah. And he also like invented his own languages, like Tolkien. 12 languages in total, and one of them is the butterfly wing beats is a language.
It also reminded me of the book Watership Down, which, although it doesn't invent an entire language for the rabbits, it invents a glossary of terms for, like, their common terms, and a sort of certain ways of thinking for them are explained too. And it felt like he had kind of just naturally sort of, in the naturally sharp way that you would expect of a Riker Troy offspring, had come up with these very creative and deeply imaginative stories.
He also had mind witches on his world of Ardani.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, that was the language that Troy was speaking, was the mind witch language. And mind witch is what someone called her in like that Broken Mirror comic. The Mirror Universe Troy that we liked. And the Tipton / J.K. Woodward comic.
Yeah.
Which we did a whole podcast about.
Do you think he was mad at his mom when he invented that language?
Yeah, maybe. Kids get mad at their parents.
I could also, by the way, see mind witch as being a almost affectionately arch term that Riker would have used for her. I loved how he actually called her Imzadi sharply in this one at one point. She says something to Picard that's some tough love moment.
Yeah, and she told him that
he's like, Imzadi. So good.
But just one last thing about Thad. Because they developed a character who feels so rich that we never see on screen, I grieve for him too. I mourn with the family. And I keep saying, like, I agree with pretty much every creative choice that went into everything on Nepenthe. It all worked for me, and I wasn't expecting it. Now, let's talk about William T. Riker himself.
It's hard to mention it without just saying how much Jonathan Frakes is just this. He is a big guy and he is a big personality, and Riker is a big personality.
There's a jolliness to him.
Yeah, he's he has a wry smile all the time, which is very endearing, and yet I loved that Riker was also a sharp dude, and when he's like, let me see if I can break down what's happening. Yeah. I think Picard...
When he's cooking pizza, let's talk about that scene.
Well, yeah, and Picard, by the way, he does not want to... He wants to protect his friends. He's like, I'm not going to tell you too much. The less you know, the better. And Riker's like, I figured it out. That's not quite how he says it, but he lays it out, and he's got it. And I was like, man...
Yeah. You're worried about cloaking devices. Okay, Romulans. really scared and worried about us. Must be Tal Shiar.
Soji is clearly an android, so they must be hunting for her. They're probably hunting for her.
And then he's like, oh, and I'd recognize that head tilt anywhere.
Yeah.
And I love that because I spotted that.
Yeah.
And she had done that in a previous episode, which I didn't catch until my second rewatch.
I don't think I caught it either.
I think I pointed it out to you. It was when they're doing the greasy slip and slide down the Borg corridor.
Yes.
Which, that would probably make me tilt my head, too, if someone, demonstrated that to me. But when she did it here, I definitely caught it. And then it cuts to Riker, and you kind of see him look at her for a bit, and he doesn't say anything at first. Mm-hmm. So I didn't think they were going to acknowledge it. I
filed it away.
I was like, look, yeah, Riker is a sharp cat. He totally picked up on that.
Yeah, but then, of course, he mentions when guys are making pizza, that's when they're going to talk about it.
And I love that, even with, this tragic death of a kid, literally, the worst thing that can happen to somebody.
Yeah.
That this family is able to overcome that, and they can still have, happy days cooking pizza with their friend John Luke.
Right.
And to me, that is much more inspirational than just a perfect future where nothing bad happens to anyone.
Right.
Or if it does happen, you have the crazy Gene Roddenberry idea of people wouldn't mourn the dead in the future. They're too perfect. Which was something that Gene actually advocated for during TNG season 2.
Yeah, it's and I agree. Honestly, we've had any number of incidents of losses. Let's see, Kirk. Sometimes of NPC character. What I think of as NPCs. Kirk's brother.
George Kirk.
We've got somewhat this was a trashier one, but Picard's nephew and brother.
Yeah, Renee and Robert.
Yep. And I had not realized until I was trying to look up something on their daughter, Kestra, that was the name.
Well, I was going to save that for the
Gorn eggs.
For the Gorn eggs.
That name has a meaning, and we'll get around to it.
So does Thad's.
Yeah. I didn't know that Thad's did. Okay, cool.
But speaking of Kestra, we also get that scene with her and Deanna and Soji in the tomatoes.
Right.
That kind of I thought was weird. I like in the past I have as a kid I would grow homegrown tomatoes, and so I thought that was cool to see that. But I've never seen someone bite into a tomato like it's like a apple.
I've seen that in movies, and I always thought it was weird until I started liking tomatoes.
Well, I love tomatoes,
but I need to if I were to do it, it'd be one of the little cherry tomatoes or something like that.
You're supposed to cut them into slices and pour salt and pepper on them, and then eat them.
Yeah, but she wanted the immediate effect of it,
and it was very kind of a.
That was the closest she got to a sort of data moment of sort of I get why this. This feels so real to people. Although, my favorite moments with that were actually when Soji was talking privately with Kestra, and
about mucus and spit.
Yeah, she's Kestra says that she's like Data did not have mucus. This is your shining achievement.
Well, that's something a kid would talk about. It's kids like to talk about gross stuff.
Yeah.
Like spit and blood and mucus.
And she also admitted that a little bit of a part of why she bonded with Soji was because if Soji is technically only 3 years old, that she thinks she's older than her and it makes her the boss of her. Which on this planet, which I guess is not uninhabited, but they're clearly isolated. That she doesn't seem to have a lot of friends.
Yeah. Her only friend seems to be Captain Krendel.
Yeah, we'll get back to that mysterious old man.
I love the concept of him, even though I don't know much about him. He comes off as very Ben Kenobi,
the mysterious old man who what does he run ships or something out of there?
Well, he has a ship.
Yeah,
but it's broken, and so is he apparently.
Yeah, and they said something he's older than Picard.
Yeah, he's been all over the galaxy.
Yeah,
so they're clearly planting a seed for something that will show up later.
Harry Mudd.
No, there's no way he's still alive. Oh, what if it is?
Harry could have found some drugs.
It's like Rainn Wilson in old man makeup.
I'd honestly, it's probably a little too much, but I'd probably be on board if his portrayal was, if it was him.
When Riker has to go help Picard, and he's like, "Okay, Captain Crandall," or should I say Harry Mudd?
Oh man. Let's not even speculate. It's too much. It's too much.
The ship had... The name of the ship was a poker reference. It's called the Inside Straight.
That does sound like something that Mudd would have.
But it also has like a little bit of like a TNG
For sure.
reference in it. I guess let's talk about like the dinner scene and kind of the climax of the arc that Soji and Picard go through. We haven't talked about Soji a ton, but yeah, this is the episode where she's like, oh, pretty much my entire life was a lie. I've just had like the mother of all manipulations with my Romulan boyfriend. I don't trust any of this. I don't trust any of you.
Yeah,
like
Picard,
she pushes Picard like her android strength, and he's like, all you have to do is say dinner's ready. And that's when like Troy has to like chew him out.
Well, yeah, both Troy and Riker. At some point, Riker says like he's like, you know, you're a lot of things, but I don't think you're ready to raise a teenager, which is effectively what you're doing here.
It's weird that she's a teenager, but also 3 years old, but also has a doctorate. Those are like three things that don't work.
Right. Well, she's not. She doesn't fit into any one category. But Picard he says like sort of dryly, like as if it's like he's like, well, yes, we're all spies. He kind of says it like preposterously, and Deanna is just like, look, in the world she's been living in with all the manipulation, that's a super distinct possibility that this is all a manipulation. And she really lays it out for Picard and gives him, that's when she hits him with some tough love there.
And sometimes Picard, he does kind of come off as like arrogant, and he can be a little pompous.
Right.
And I feel like
Starfleet called him out on it, somewhat rightfully. And
for sure.
What if Troy had said that?
The sheer fucking hubris, John Luke.
Yes. But with her accent.
Oh, but I do like that Marina Sirtis was... She did more like the traditional Troy accent from TNG, which she kind of gave up on in later
fell away.
TNG movies.
I don't think I noticed particularly one way or the other. She just sounded like Troy to me.
Yeah.
But she, I kind of... Yeah, if she threw a little bit more of the accent in there, I kind of like that. Anyway, yeah, I adored that performance, and... I felt like Soji, for the first time, became a character I cared about. Sadly, her just being manipulated by Narek and kind of going along with it, and being generally earnest otherwise, was not quite enough to endear her to me. I needed this episode to, like, really get in her corner.
It's weird that, like, Daj, in, like, half an episode, kind of left more of an impression than Soji has.
Well, Daj was a woman in need of rescue, and like I think like a character in need of rescue. She, you know, we immediately had her sympathy because we had just learned that she was linked to Data.
It was Picard, the Dixon Hill type of like film noir detective pulpy type of trope.
Right. But we saw that she had an emotional resonance with Picard that went beyond sort of the noir hook. That where he was like, to him, she represented Data and represented guilt and represented his friend and all of that stuff.
The weird thing there was that she seemed to have like a programming to like default trust Picard.
Yeah.
That Maddox must have put in there.
Yeah. And that clearly Soji doesn't have, even though Picard's like, trust me, several times.
I can see with the...
Or maybe it is working, I don't know.
All the trauma that Soji has gone through, I can see where like even with that programming, she'd still be a little hesitant. I mean, she did ultimately when Picard and Hugh showed up in the last episode in front of her, and he's like, I know this is weird, and we've never met, but you have to trust me. I knew your sister. Come on, I can help you. She was reluctant, but she did go with him and get on the spatial projector and everything.
It makes sense. By the time that happened, she had been through a decent amount with Narek, had come to think he was Tal Shiar and know that he might be manipulating her in some ways, and I guess had gone through the actual full manipulation. So, yes, her being less instinctively trusting than Daj actually makes complete sense.
But this dinner conversation, with the help of Riker and Troy, Picard kind of becomes, in a way, like he kind of captures some of what he's lost. And he says, look, this is a big deal to me. I cared a lot about Data. I wanted to help your sister, and it's important to me, like, have like a mission to contribute. And I promise you, now that like I got my shit back together, no one... I think he says, like, no one has a hell of a chance of stopping me, not even you. And he's able to convince her using the things that Troy pointed out, like the most admirable traits of Picard. It was things like when she says, you need to be Jean-Luc Picard, compassionate, patient, curious. And we kind of have like all eyes on Soji when Kestra, Riker, Troy, they're all staring at her like, so what are you going to do? Are you going to trust him? And he does a little bit like Picard speechifying.
Yep.
And he finally like gets her on board.
Yeah. And I need those moments throughout. I need Picard's ethos to be proven, and in some ways that's TNG's ethos to be proven to have merit. I like those scenes. I did think it was a little weird that he felt like he could pause to kind of talk things over and plan and do all this stuff on this planet, knowing that the Romulans knew the location of the synth planet and were on their way there, and that he didn't have any good plans to get there, or maybe even know how far it was.
He did say that, like, it was just like kind of just like on impulse when he came to Nepenthe.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, okay, get off this cube. Where are you going? Where are you going? Yeah. You have to decide right now. There's a bunch of Tal Shiar guards run down this hallway.
Right.
So I guess, like, Nepenthe, I'm safe there.
Right. I'm just saying, like, on some level, he probably should have gotten there and been like, we need to get to your planet ASAP. All the speed that we've needed before is, if anything,
I don't think he knew that until, like, they have, like, the dinner conversation.
You don't think so?
Because
Did he say that he knew that the Romulans were...
No, that was revealed when Soji, after he got Soji to trust him, then she says what they were pulling from her memory. They got my home planet... Oh. And
he should have thrown down his napkin and been like, "Oh, we need to get the fuck out of here."
Well, his ship was already on the way. They established that it wasn't easy to get off this planet. There wasn't many ships that came through the spaceport, and there's a broken man with a broken ship. That doesn't sound very helpful.
They better hope that the Romulans are taking the scenic route.
I actually think his bases are covered there. I don't think he could have done it any more urgency.
I guess it's not.
He's already like comm badging to Rios like every 5 minutes. Like, how much longer? When are you going to get here?
Yeah, that was funny. Rios gives him, like, this kind of, like, real brusque response. And Riker is like... Because, Riker had asked, what's your new crew like? And he's like, well... What does he say?
They're motley, yeah.
Yeah. And Riker gets to hear it for himself, no doubt thinking, like... If that had happened in my day, you would have bit that guy's head off.
But I do like that Picard does kind of annoy Raffi and Rios and all these people. He has this... That's how old people kind of are. Right. Sometimes they're kind of a handful to deal with.
Right, and in a way, the very qualities that he had that we liked on the show also make him a bit of a stodgy know-it-all, and probably a bit more so as he grows into it in his older
And the
years.
show was acknowledging, like, these characters are different. This is a very different show than The Next Generation. That's the price of admission to get in.
Yeah. I would say that I would love to see a Riker-Troy show where they're on some spaceship or something like that, but for the fact that I'm happy with them where they are and I don't want them to be thrust back into a life of tragedy. So I'm actually very happy with where they...
Well, they leave that door open because Riker says, I'm still on active reserve. If there's a good reason, they can draft me back into Starfleet.
I certainly would not mind seeing guest stuff, and they could convince me if they... Especially if it was some sort of kind of more exploratory thing. No,
they're definitely going to bring them back. I don't know if they're planning on doing that later this season or in season 2. Mm-hmm. But this episode was shot towards the end of the first season. We know that they did know that they were going to get a second season pretty early on. So I think that they might be planting seeds here more for season 2 than anything.
Interesting.
And I think that might be when we get like Captain Crandall. Or Rudolph Crandall, or Crandall or Crandall?
You've written Crandall on your notes.
Okay, yeah, Rudolph Crandall, who did have like a big contribution in this episode, by the way, when he's the one who figured out the planet with the 2 moons and the lightning.
Right.
That it only has a number. Because I thought that Kestra was like Googling it on her smartphone under the table. But
she was texting him.
She was texting him.
To call it something more Star Trek-y, it's like transwarp texting.
Subspace.
Subspace, yeah, yes.
But yeah, we have like... the Riker and Picard having coffee. They have like that cool little heart-to-heart moment sitting out on like the dock on the lake, and then finally like Rios shows up and can beam Soji and Picard on board, and they will go to Soji's Ardani. She has her own homeworld.
Soji on Ardani.
It doesn't work.
I guess.
I think that's gone. It
All
died.
Right. I like to imagine that I put the final nail.
It was beautiful while it lived, and now it's gone. And just let it be.
Before this podcast, before the Tex-Trek's Picard podcasts are done, I will hear you say Soji on the Borg cube one more time.
Yeah, I'll do it for like the last episode of Picard,
All
and
right.
whenever we get to that, in like season
Regale
3
us
or
with
whatever.
it. Yeah.
But yeah, that's Oh, and I guess like Soji got like a compass from Kestra. I don't know.
Oh
if
yeah,
that
I wasn't
any-
quite sure what that
It
was.
wasn't like
It was a broken
thematic-
compass. A broken compass. She said something like, "You have to pretend it works."
I don't know. Maybe
I mean, that
maybe
spoke
that'll
to
come
kind
back.
of the imaginative world that she and her brother had kind of lived in. But yeah, I don't know quite what it means. There's definitely some symbolism things floating around, whether it's Narek's cube or that compass. There's some somewhat pregnant imagery that I haven't completely puzzled out yet either. I mean, it kind of sort of, a compass that doesn't work, but you're still meant to trust in it. Almost suggests following instinct over rationality, but I don't know. We'll find out.
I don't really have much else to say about this episode before we get into the Gorn eggs. Just, do you have like any? I kind of don't like to forecast too much because, like I said, like I like to be surprised. But like any like big predictions going into this final act of the season, we only have 3 episodes left. I think we're the stakes are at their highest. This android world is in danger. The Romulans are out to get them, and so I think what we're going to have next week is something that kind of tees up a 2-part finale, which we know that like episodes 9 and 10 are going to be a 2-part story. So
I actually don't have any big predictions. I think my biggest question is actually wondering whether a Data is going to play any sort of role in any of this stuff.
Yeah, or if maybe we somehow have like a return of Data or a resurrection of Data, even though Brent Spiner said like he didn't want to do that, but
we don't
know
Brent
what we can
Spiner
trust.
on the Ready Room show. I thought it was a little bit weird because clearly Will Wheaton had so many questions to ask Jonathan Frakes, who was both in this episode and wait, did he direct this? No, he didn't direct this one. He was just starring in this one. But Brent Spiner hasn't appeared in several episodes. Usually the guest star has something to do.
I called that too. I said at the very beginning, the first episode, I was like, these are like the 2 scenes we saw of Data in the trailers. I asked you and Brian, do y'all think we're done with Data, or at least like done with him until maybe like the end of the season or something? And I don't remember what you said. I remember like Brian said like, oh no, I think we're gonna get a lot of Data. We'll probably have like Data dreams in every episode. I was like, I don't think so.
We didn't get Data dreams in every episode.
No.
I believe we probably will see Data in some way, shape, or form before this is all done, and so I'm very curious about that.
Maybe we'll see a resurrected Dr. Soong. Maddox did say that, like, in building Soji and Dodge, he's like, so much of your work went into that, and so much of Soong's work went into that.
Right. I would rather see a resurrected Hugh, personally, but...
No, don't undo your deaths. It's like, Hugh died, he died winning. He died winning. He said, like, look, this is a lost cause, but I know you can do it, Elnor, because that's your thing, that's your jam. You go get an X-Borg, and you stop these Romulans. And he died being the hopeful fool again. And I like that. And that's like one of my predictions here, is I want to see 7 of 9 get in this queen cell, take over control of the cube, start kicking Romulan ass, and I want her to say, resistance is futile.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, let's do that next week. I want to see it.
All right.
But that's all.
But I don't have any. I don't have any major predictions. Let's go ahead and jump to the Gorn eggs.
Okay. So, this is a lot. I'll try to go through them very fast.
Let's knock it out.
First Gorn egg. In the opening with Commodore O in the flashback, she mentions that Dr. Girardi had downloaded some information to a personal access display device.
Yep.
This, of course, forms the acronym PAD, like the little tablet computers that are been frequently used in Star Trek.
Yep. That was a TNG and onward era, but I guess did they have them in TOS? Just
they
actually had clipboards and stuff.
Yeah, but those are supposed to be pads,
right?
That's kind of how it's been in Discovery, and they had them on Enterprise.
Yeah.
In the mind meld, Commodore O recites the words "my mind to your mind." This is like the abridged version of the frequent ritual where a Vulcan will say, my mind to your mind, my thoughts to your thoughts. Our minds are merging, our minds are becoming one.
Right. She did the shorthand version. Yeah. She gave him the short answer.
Which,
gave her the short answer.
Most of the time in Star Trek, they do shorten it, actually.
Yeah.
When Picard is being threatened by Kestra's arrow, he says, you might want to aim at my head, my heart is duratanium. This is a reference to the artificial heart that Picard had. We actually saw him get stabbed, and he by a Nausicaan in the episode Tapestry when he was a young
Brawl.
man.
Yeah, when he was what kind of in
right out of the
Starfleet
academy.
Okay,
like,
right.
It was right after he graduated.
Got it.
Oh, and duratanium is a material in Star Trek that had been mentioned before on Voyager and on Enterprise. Now, speaking of Kestra, as Dave mentioned earlier, her name has some meaning. She's actually named after Deanna Troy's older sister, who died before Deanna was born, who she didn't know about. Mm-hmm. That was, I don't really like this episode. It's in a very weak season of Star Trek Next Generation, Season 7, where they did a bunch of episodes about people's family for some reason, and this is the episode where it's like, oh, it turns out Troy had a secret sister.
Right, and she drowned, I think?
Yeah, it was some type of accident like that. I think, yeah she drowned.
It's a little bit weird when people in Star Trek's future drown or
die in a house fire.
Die in a house fire.
Yeah, I think both of those are dumb. And I don't like Generations either. So those are both two stories I don't like.
But it is kind of a neat callback to someone who, a name that would hold meaning.
Yeah, and this actually leaked like months before the show started. Someone was going around online saying like, oh, there's this name Kestra that's in the show, so that's probably going to be Troy and Riker's daughter, named after the dead child.
That's too bad that got spilled.
Yeah, I pointed that out to you a long time ago, but I guess you forgot.
Of course.
And not just Kestra, but Thad Troy Riker, or Thaddeus, is likely named after Thaddeus Riker, who was a Union soldier in the American Civil War and encountered a member of the Q Continuum, as we learned in the Star Trek Voyager episode Death Wish.
Yeah. And
they're putting like that one Q on trial to see if he like deserved the right to end his life or not. And
that was in that one. Okay.
He was like, I bet this guy's like great grandpappy in the Civil War.
Mm-hmm. That's a good episode. I really liked that one, actually. I didn't remember that scene, but I thought that was one of the more intriguing Q episodes, at least.
Yeah, no, I like it. It was fun seeing Jonathan Frakes on Voyager.
Yeah.
And another Gorn egg related to Thad.
Uh-huh.
In his bedroom, we see a picture of Picard with baby Thad. That is the Enterprise E briefing room.
Oh, interesting.
Now, they actually goofed up here.
Uh-huh.
Picard is in an Admiral uniform.
Uh-huh.
This would have had to have been, like, about 17 years earlier or more if Thad was about to be 18, if he was still alive.
Uh-huh.
And here he is looking like a newborn. But Picard shouldn't have been an admiral back then. He should have only become an admiral more recently when it was when he was getting ready for the Romulan evacuation. As kind of what they established before is that was when he took the promotion to admiral.
Right.
But
just a little oopsie.
Yeah, they were trying to do something really cool by showing us like the Enterprise E briefing room.
Yeah. And Picard with a little baby.
That he totally forgot that he met that kid as a baby. When Riker is in the kitchen, I guess getting his pizza dough ready, he got like flour slinging around and gets flour all over Picard's jacket, which kind of bothered me when he hugs him in the kitchen. But he's listening to jazz music. We know that Riker was a big jazz fan and played the trombone. He mentions that they've had problems with the Kzinti, which this made me very happy to hear. Because
deep cut to the animated series.
Yes, we have not had mention of the Kzinti on screen since the 70s in the animated series.
Yeah. What was that? Slaver weapon?
Yeah.
And those were created, if I'm not mistaken, like by Larry Niven.
Yes.
And actually come from the Ringworld books.
Yes.
They just kind of crossed over into Star Trek for his script.
And I doubt that we'll ever see them on screen, even though I think it would be cool.
But it's a deep cut. It's a super deep cut.
Kestra is asking Soji if she likes violin or Sherlock Holmes. We know that Data on the Next Generation
Data callback,
had some proficient violin skills and also loved to dress up as Sherlock Holmes and play on the holodeck.
You ever learn comedy from Joe Piscopo? Should have asked that.
Well, she brings that up too.
He wanted to be learn to laugh or to tell jokes and stuff.
My next Gorn egg is that Kestra said that Data just wanted things like to be able to have dreams, tell jokes, learn how to ballroom dance. These are all Next Generation episodes. Yep. We had Data learn to dream in Birthright. We had Data learns to tell jokes in The Outrageous Okana, when he learns that Jerry Lewis routine.
Yep.
And
we say tell jokes in quotes here.
that's questionable if it's a joke or not.
He learns the ballroom dance from no less than Gates McFadden.
Yes,
a real-life dance choreographer.
In the episode Data's Day. On the La Sirena, Agnes suggests that she would love to be the fun crew member who says things like, why don't we go hide inside of a comet? It turns out to be a Gormagander. Gormagander, of course, being the giant space creature that Harry Mudd was hiding in the episode of Star Trek Discovery, Magics to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad.
Mm-hmm.
On Nepenthe, Riker is growing Antaran basil. In the original series, there is mention of Antarian brandy.
Right.
I think that was in the episode Is There in Truth No Beauty?
Okay.
And there's also mention of Antarian glow water in The Trouble with Triples. I think that was something that Cyrano Jones was trying to peddle.
Interesting.
To the bartender on the K7 station.
All kinds of interesting stuff happen on Antaria or Antares.
Antarian, not to be confused with Antarian.
Okay.
Because there's two of there's Antarean is the one from TOS. But then on Voyager there was Antarian. Antarian has an I instead of an E.
Okay.
There is not Antaran, but Antarian cider and Antarian moon blossoms in the Delta Quadrant. As you pointed out, Riker does call Troy Mzadi, the Beta Z word for beloved, I guess.
Yep.
Kestra mentions that Rudolph Crandall has been all over the galaxy, or so he claims, from Kronos to Tychon's Rift. Kronos, as we know from Star Trek VI and many other pieces of Star Trek since then, is the name of the Klingon homeworld. And Tychon's Rift is from the TNG episode Night Terrors, I believe is the name, where they get like their messed up dreams, they start to hallucinate. And
this one where Riker thinks he's being an alien abducted?
No, this isn't that one.
Oh, okay.
It's like the other scary one. It's where like they find the ship full of dead people.
Yeah.
And then Crusher has like that hallucination, like all the bodies rise up in the morgue.
Yeah.
And
one of the creepier scenes ever.
And Troy's having that dream of like one moon circles because they have to get communicated by the aliens to ignite the hydrogen to push them like out of the Tychon's Rift.
It's kind of cool.
So this is the Tychon's Rift. We discussed that episode when we did our Halloween podcast a long time ago.
Yep.
Riker says at the dinner table that he's known this man for 35 years. He's of course referring to the first time he met Jean-Luc Picard, which we saw on screen in the episode Encounter at Farpoint in the year 2364, exactly 35 years before this episode of Picard in 2399.
Back when Riker was a beardless whelp.
And for our final Gornegg, the poison that Agnes Jurati replicates in the La Sirena sickbay, in the hypo spray that she uses on herself, is neuranium hydrate. Neuranium is a material that the only time I think it was mentioned is in the Star Trek Next Generation episode, The Vengeance Factor. That's the one where they have like that band of marauders, and speaking of like Lost Boys with like leather jackets and mullets, they kind of have that look, and they were trying to like get like a peace deal with the other aliens, and there's all like these like political rivalries. They don't like each other, and Marina Sirtez's real life husband, Michael Lamper, who sadly passed away recently, actually played one of like these small characters in that episode. But that's the only other time I think we've ever heard the word neuranium.
That is a lot of deep cuts.
Yes.
Nothing you, I think, like have to know about to enjoy them, but some kind of nice Easter eggs for the long-running fans.
Like me, as someone who like hunts for that stuff, I'm like, oh my god, I have my hands full keeping up with all this.
Yeah. Kzinti, I feel like, is the deepest cut.
Yeah. I definitely was more excited to hear Kzinti than I was to hear neuranium, but I will gladly take both. I'm really hungry for a 47. I feel like I'm owed one at this point. So
I hope you get pissed if you don't get it. I want to see the rant.
I think they'll do one on accident at some point if there's not an intentional one.
Okay.
Before the end of the show. But if I missed any Gorneggs that you noticed, please let us know. We will make a correction in our next podcast, and
Fatheree will beg forgiveness.
I'll tell everyone that I was too unobservant to spot it, but thank the great bird of the galaxy, someone found it, and we'll talk about it then. Or if you have any other comments about this episode, let us know, and we might share them next week as well. Because right now we're going to look at our subspace transmissions from last week's episode and give a little bit of feedback. We only have time for a few here, but Dave, what do we have?
All right, so diving into responses to last week's episode, The Impossible Box. First up, we got from YouTube, Diggs Briarthorn, who says, "The nice thing about this episode's scenes with Narissa and Narek is that Narek finally asserted himself and won, so it wasn't like the previous episodes. Narissa was using flirtation to imitate Narek and make him feel uncomfortable. It's a fairly common Trek trope. Uhura did the same thing to Mirror Sulu. In the next episode, Narissa will harass Hugh. I expect Elnor to decapitate her." She harassed him pretty hardcore, yeah. I guess I'd say.
He definitely aimed to decapitate her. And then...
Yeah. I believe that prediction will probably come to pass.
He got manipulated by her master manipulation when she put down her disruptor and he put away his sword.
Yeah. That was a big oops. He thought that she was going to be honorable.
He's young. He's naive. He doesn't understand deception.
Well, he's learned the hard way, yes. And Hugh paid the price for his fucking hubris.
Yes, the clandestine Romulan fuckery is a harsh tutor.
Oh, nice. I like that bit of dialogue. Let's jump on to some Twitter stuff here. Triangulum Audio Studio says of the episode, "I thought it was great, and I love the reunion of Picard and Hugh. Thought they'd go with an angry reaction between the two. Was pleasantly surprised by the warmth." We've since learned that scene that was kind of improv by the actors. Yeah, I think.
And I actually thought it was a little weird because I was like, kind of
too friendly.
Yeah, like.
Yes to Riker, maybe not so much immediately with Hugh.
Yeah, like the last time we left Hugh, he was kind of like cranky with everyone, and
right.
He's like, "Me and my Borg renegades are going to go over here, do our own thing, leave us alone."
I sometimes assume that there might have been a little bit of talk in the interim that might have, they might have like formed somewhat warmer bonds.
I think so. I think we can assume that probably happened, actually.
Several people have mentioned, as I'm just going to read, Justin Martin says, Card's reaction to seeing himself as Locutus was great. And several people mentioned that image.
It was a very haunting image.
Yeah, Final Frontier says the way they juxtaposed his actual face with the image on the display was brilliant. So
yeah, that really stood out to me. And if I had been able to speak on the podcast last week, I definitely would have harped on that.
The coolness of that sequence, yeah.
It was kind of something you can only do in like a visual medium with motion, I guess. Like it's something you can only do in film. And I like when our storytelling mediums find those things and does them.
Yeah, for sure. Brian Yates says, expected them to spend more time on the cube, but happy with what we got. Perhaps when the current crisis is over, Picard and Seven will work with Hugh for ex-Borg rights. Well, they probably won't work with Hugh. But I don't think we're done with the cube. I do think you will end up seeing more of that.
And I do think Hugh succeeded in, a big part of like why he agreed to bring Picard over. And he showed him all of the XBs was because he wanted a Picard who would go back to the Federation and be an advocate for ex-Borg rights.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, Stu Mevins says, overall a strong episode. Michelle Hurd continues to bring it with her portrayal of a very much broken woman. And the cinematography, I just don't have enough words to say how brilliant it is. I think that's a fair thing to bring up. We don't always think to. It's just how visually lush the show is. How kind of in control I think they are with these with their establishing shots and the visual continuity of it.
Also with Michelle Hurd.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you recall, but when we got her full-on introduction way back in the third episode of the show, mm-hmm. I said that I was kind of underwhelmed. With the character and honestly with like the performance, but. No, they've given her more to do. I've certainly come around to her, and not just with last week's episode, but this week's episode, both. I really love watching her.
I generally like all the interactions going on board. The
La Sirena.
La Sirena.
They're all very watchable actors.
Mm-hmm.
But that is everything we have to say. I know that was a lot that we unloaded on you. Be a part of the conversation with us. Return fire and shoot your feedback to us. Let us know what you think about it. And then next week, join us again, and we will discuss Episode 8, Broken Pieces, where I think we're going to learn the full secret of the Zot-Vash and this Romulan hatred of cybernetics and what this mind meld was all about and all of that stuff.
On a symbolic level, aside from the pieces that, all those scribblings of the XBs look like almost had like a puzzle-like quality. The Borg cube, the Rubik's Cube that Narek has a puzzle-like quality. The opening of the title sequence shows Picard's face forming from like small pieces that are like puzzle pieces. So, yes, I think that thematically we're the puzzle's starting to get put together.
And I'll finally find out when the pieces do connect and form the picture, if it's the big payoff that I want, or if it's the disappointment that I fear.
Yeah. Guess we'll find out.
And until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek, and follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.